Hello everybody and welcome back to this special series of Virtual Road Trip, where we look at the beauty and history of the reservoirs and aqueducts of the New York City water supply system. This time we're heading west to see two of the largest reservoirs in the entire system, the Pepacton and Cannonsville reservoirs. Be prepared for a lot of scenery. I hope that's your thing. But first, a quick little bit of historical context. The first decades of the 20th century saw a nationwide trend of people flocking to cities, and New York saw the largest increase in population. Millions of immigrants came to America through Ellis Island and New York Harbor, and many stayed and settled in the city. After the completion of the Catskill system in the 1920s, the city's continued growth only further increased the demand for fresh water. Engineers continued to look deeper into the Catskill Mountains for more valleys to flood. This would lead to the creation of the Delaware System, by far the largest, and increasing the total capacity of the system by 50%. Initially, two smaller reservoirs were built starting in the early 1940s, the Rondout and the Neversink, each impounding the rivers they were named after. Less than a decade after, the Pepacton Reservoir was built by impounding the East Branch of the Delaware River. Shortly after, the final reservoir, the Cannonsville, was built by impounding the West Branch of the Delaware. By 1964, the entire system was complete. Our first stop will be the Pepacton. Located between Margaretville, New York to the east and Downsville, New York to the west, the Pepacton is the largest reservoir in the entire system by volume, as well as the deepest. Stretching 15 miles in length, it carves a narrow path through the heart of the western Catskills. Constructed between 1942 and 1954, the reservoir went into service by 1955. Several towns existed within the valley, and much like the other reservoir projects, these towns, such as Arena, Shavertown, and Union Grove, were forcibly removed, razed to the ground, and flooded. The name Pepacton comes from the Lenape people, who were the natives living in the area when Europeans first arrived. It is said to mean marriage of the waters. The reservoir is a hot spot for trout fishing, with the economy of the local area depending heavily on tourism. Now let's enjoy some nice views before we move on. In the distance, you can see the intake portal for the East Delaware Tunnel. Here is a much closer look at the intake building. This tunnel connects the Pepacton to the Rondout Reservoir further south. From there, water will enter the main Delaware Aqueduct. We will get into this tunnel in much more detail in a later video. We've now made it to the Downsville Dam at the western end of the reservoir. At the time I filmed this, water levels were very high after recent heavy rains, and in the distance you can see mists from the high volume of water overflowing the spillway. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any closer. The dam is very heavily protected. The dam is earthen embankment like most others in the reservoir system, and lies next to the deepest point. Slightly further west is the aforementioned village of Downsville, New York. We've now reached our second destination, the Cannonsville Reservoir. Both the newest and most western reservoir in the system it impounds the west branch of the Delaware River. The Cannonsville is similar to the Pepacton, being narrow and long. It also has a large arm where the Trout Creek flows in from the north. Water from the Cannonsville Reservoir will flow nearly 130 miles to its destination just north of the Bronx, an impressive distance. Put into service in 1963, it is the most recently completed reservoir as well. By this time, the engineering and construction of reservoirs like this was not considered nearly as impressive as it was just a half-century earlier, as numerous large reservoirs had been built by this time all over the country. Still, the Cannonsville gave New York City the capacity needed to have enough drinking water for its burgeoning population. The former towns within the valley, such as Rock Rift and Beersville, met a familiar fate and no longer exist. Here's an interesting spot. This is the former alignment of State Route 10. Originally, this road traveled through the valley along the west branch of the Delaware and serviced the small towns within. After construction, it was rerouted above the water line. However, this small part remained to be used as a boat launch. This is just a subtle clue to the former valley that once existed before being flooded. I think it's a pretty cool spot. We finally reached the Cannonsville Dam at the southwestern end, just north of the village of Deposit, New York. Unlike the Downsville Dam, this one is slightly bigger, curved, and is used for hydroelectric power, producing 14 megawatts in total. From here, the west branch continues south until it meets the east branch just south of Hancock, New York. So that's going to end our journey today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. So far, we've covered 4 reservoirs, 1 aqueduct, and driven a lot of miles, that's for sure. But it's been worth it. Next up, I'm hoping to do a video on the Delaware Tunnel, the longest tunnel in the world, by the way, and many of the issues it currently has, which should be very interesting. So keep a lookout for that. In the meantime, I hope to maybe do some more road trip videos or perhaps other informative videos as well. We'll see what comes down the pipeline. But that's going to do it today. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, enjoy the ride. I'll see you then.